Sometimes the universe doesn't whisper, it screams. And when it doesn't care if you're ready. It will bring your past right to your table, dressed in pain and unfinished chapters. That night, Ethan Reed learned this the hard way. The clatter of a distant fork sounded like a thunderclap in the suddenly suffocating silence at Ethan Reed's table. Olivia's question, "May I take your order?" innocuous to any other patron at L'Etoile Filante, was a live wire for him and an intriguing puzzle for Sophia Vance, his current companion. He had buried her memory under layers of success, or so he thought. Now Olivia Hayes stood before him, a living testament to a life he'd discarded, and she was about to serve him more than just expensive wine. Ethan's throat constricted. Words, usually his most pliable tools, deserted him entirely. His mind, a finely tuned machine accustomed to navigating billion-dollar deals and hostile takeovers for Apex Ventures, had short-circuited. All systems were down. Sophia, ever poised, arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow at Ethan's sudden muteness before turning a cool, appraising gaze upon Olivia. "A glass of your finest Chardonnay, please," she said, her voice smooth as silk. Then, with a glance back at Ethan, whose pallor was now alarming, she added, "And for my partner, he seems to have lost his appetite for a moment. Water will do for now, sparkling." Her tone was light, almost playful, but her eyes, sharp and intelligent, missed nothing. They lingered on Olivia for a fraction of a second too long. A subtle cataloging taking place. Olivia's professional mask was expertly crafted, but Ethan, who had once known every nuance of her expressions, saw the tremor in her hand as she jotted down the order. Her eyes, the same deep hazel that had once held galaxies for him, briefly met his. In their depths he saw it, a flash of old pain, a raw, unguarded flicker of a shared past, quickly shuttered away. "Certainly," she murmured, her voice a low thrum that vibrated through him, and then she retreated, weaving through the opulent dining room with a grace that seemed out of place, given her simple black uniform. Disoriented, Ethan watched her go, the crystal and silver of L'Etoile Filante blurring around him. A torrent of memories, unwelcome and overwhelming, flooded his senses. Olivia. Their whirlwind courtship, a dizzying kaleidoscope of laughter, shared dreams whispered under starry skies, and a passion that had felt elemental, world-altering. He remembered the loft apartment they'd shared, filled with mismatched furniture and ambitious plans, his own for Apex Ventures, hers for a small art gallery. Then came the bitter arguments, the growing chasm as Apex Ventures began to consume him, its demands relentless, its rewards intoxicating. He'd chosen the empire, and in doing so he'd lost her. The unspoken truths of their breakup, the things left unsaid, now screamed in the sudden void of the restaurant's ambient hum. He saw Olivia pause at another table, her smile polite, professional. The stark contrast between her current attire, a plain black blouse and apron, and the elegant designer dresses she once wore, dresses he had often bought her, was a fresh stab of guilt. And then his eyes snagged on it, a detail that sharpened the focus of his chaotic thoughts. A small, antique silver locket nestled at the base of her throat. It was intricately carved, catching the light with a dull gleam. He knew that locket. Or did he? A vague, unsettling memory stirred, just out of reach, like a name on the tip of his tongue. He couldn't take his eyes off it, a tiny silver anchor in the sea of his emotional turmoil. Sophia's voice, impeccably modulated, sliced through his reverie. "Ethan, darling, are you quite all right? You seem a million miles away." She leaned closer, her perfume expensive and subtle, a stark contrast to the phantom scent of lavender and old books he suddenly associated with Olivia. Something familiar about that waitress, perhaps? Her question was casual, yet beneath the surface, he sensed a keen, probing intelligence. Was it just concern, or was there a hint of suspicion in her perfectly made-up eyes? "No, not at all," he lied, the word feeling like ash in his mouth. "Just work. A deal at Apex is hitting a snag." He forced a dismissive wave of his hand, a gesture he hoped looked more confident than he felt. He was a master of deflection in the boardroom. Surely he could manage it here. Olivia returned with their drinks, placing them on the starched white linen with practiced efficiency. Her movements were economical, graceful, despite the visible strain around her eyes, the faint shadows beneath them telling a story of exhaustion. As she set down his sparkling water, Sophia leaned forward, her smile dazzling. "You know, you look awfully familiar." she said directly to Olivia, her voice carrying an edge of challenge. "Have we met before?" Olivia's gaze flickered towards Ethan for the briefest of moments, an almost imperceptible question in their depths, before returning to Sophia. A tiny muscle twitched near her jaw. "I don't believe so," she replied, her voice even, perhaps a little too even. I'm new here." The lie hung in the air, palpable and heavy. She offered a tight professional smile and was gone again, a silent retreat. "Well," Sophia murmured, taking a delicate sip of her Chardonnay, her eyes fixed on Ethan. "That was awkward, painfully so. Are you absolutely sure you don't know her, Ethan? She certainly kept looking at you. And you, my dear, look as though you've encountered a specter from a particularly regrettable past." Ethan forced a laugh, a hollow sound that echoed the emptiness suddenly yawning within him. "You're imagining things, Sophia. Stress, as I said." But his mind was a maelstrom. Olivia. Here. Pregnant. The questions bombarded him, each one a fresh wave of shock and a deeper, more corrosive guilt. How had the vibrant, ambitious woman he'd loved, the woman who'd once managed marketing campaigns for global brands with flair and brilliance, ended up waiting tables, her spirit seemingly dimmed by hardship? Why hadn't she reached out if she was struggling? Had her pride, always a fierce and beautiful thing, become an insurmountable wall? And the baby? Whose child was it? The thought sent a sharp, unidentifiable pang through him, something akin to yearning? Or was it just profound regret for a future they'd never had? The rest of the dinner was a charade, a meticulously performed play of celebration. The truffle risotto Sophia had craved tasted like cardboard to Ethan. He nodded, smiled, made the appropriate noises, but his attention was a tether, constantly pulling him back to Olivia as she moved through the room. He watched her discreetly, cataloging the tired lines around her eyes, the gentle curve of her belly beneath the apron, the quiet dignity that radiated from her, despite her circumstances. Each glance was a fresh twist of the knife in his conscience. This wasn't just a financial struggle. It was a story of unspoken truths, of a life diverted, a path he had, perhaps, forced her onto. As they finally rose to leave, Sophia, linking her arm through his, remarked with a casualness that felt like a deliberate barb. "Odd girl, that waitress. Pretty in a washed-out sort of way, but so terribly sad, don't you think?" Ethan didn't respond. He couldn't. His thoughts were entirely consumed by Olivia, by the myriad of unspoken questions and the overwhelming weight of his past relationship. The air outside Les Trois Filantes was cool, but he felt flushed, suffocated by his own internal storm. In the plush, silent cocoon of the limousine, Sophia tried to draw him close, her fingers tracing patterns on his arm. "The cerulean keys will be wonderful, won't they, darling?" she murmured, her voice soft, inviting. "Just what we need after all this excitement." She was referring to his recent Apex Ventures triumph, the very reason for their celebratory dinner. He nodded absently, his gaze fixed on the blurred city lights streaking past the window. The cerulean keys. A week of sun-drenched indolence on a private island. It had sounded like paradise only hours ago. Now it felt like an escape, a cowardly retreat from something vast and undefined that had just re-entered his life. He made a non-committal sound, and Sophia, sensing his profound distance, withdrew her hand, a subtle tightening around her lips the only sign of her displeasure. Back in the sterile, echoing expanse of his penthouse, the silence was no longer a comfort, but an amplifier for his turmoil. The minimalist decor, once a testament to his controlled, uncluttered life, now felt cold, empty, devoid of the warmth Olivia had once brought to their shared spaces. He poured himself a stiff brandy, the amber liquid, doing little to soothe the agitation churning within him. Restless, he found himself drawn to his study, to a bookshelf lined with leather-bound classics and, tucked away on a lower shelf, a collection of old photo albums. He hadn't looked at them in years. His fingers, almost of their own accord, pulled one out. It was heavier than he remembered, weighted with the ghosts of a past he had tried to meticulously expunge. He flipped through the pages, images of a younger, less cynical version of himself flashing by. And then he stopped. There she was, Olivia, her smile radiant, unburdened. They were on a windswept cliff, the ocean a wild blue behind them. Young, impossibly happy, their arms around each other. And there, glinting against the simple cotton of her summer dress, was the silver locket. The same locket she was wearing tonight. His breath hitched. He remembered it clearly now. It had belonged to his grandmother, a cherished heirloom. He had given it to Olivia on their first anniversary, a symbol of a love he had believed would last forever. Why was she still wearing it? After all these years, after the bitterness of their divorce, after everything he had put her through, with his relentless ambition for apex ventures? What did it mean? Was it a reminder? A reproach? Or something else entirely? The questions swirled, deepening the mystery, tightening the knot of guilt and burgeoning concern in his chest. He stared at the photograph, at the smiling face of the woman he had lost, the woman who was now carrying a child, serving tables to survive, yet still wearing his grandmother's locket. A new resolve, hard and urgent, began to form within him. This couldn't be a coincidence. He had to understand. He had to know what had happened to her, to the dreams they once shared. He had to know about the baby. The silver locket felt like a key, a clue he couldn't ignore. His hand reached for his phone, an idea, sharp and sudden, sparking in the chaos of his mind. There was someone who might have answers, someone who had remained Olivia's friend long after their world had shattered. The photograph of a smiling Olivia, locket glinting, felt like a brand against his conscience. He couldn't just let this go. His fingers hovered over his phone's keypad, a name coming to mind. Someone who had stayed friends with Olivia after their world shattered. The city lights outside Ethan's penthouse seemed to mock his inner darkness. The image of Olivia, pregnant and waiting tables at L'Étoile Filante, was seared into his mind, overlaid with the spectral glow of the locket in the old photograph. One name echoed in the silence, a fragile thread to a past he had thought severed. Chloe Jenkins. Some calls are easy, routine transactions in a life built on calculated moves and leveraged connections. This one felt different. This felt like dialing a number to his own past, a past he wasn't sure he was ready to face, a past that now had Olivia's tired, haunted eyes. But the image of those eyes, the memory of her quiet dignity in the face of what was clearly an agonizing situation, spurred him on. He found Chloe's number in an old, archived contact list, a relic from a time when his life had been intertwined with Olivia's. His thumb hovered over the call button, a moment of profound hesitation. What if Chloe refused to speak to him? What if she, quite rightly, hung up on the man who had broken her best friend's heart? He took a breath, the air in his opulent, sterile apartment suddenly feeling thin, and pressed call. The phone rang 3 times, each chime amplifying the nervous thrum in his chest. Then a voice, familiar yet matured by the intervening years. Hello? Chloe? It's Ethan. Ethan Reed. A beat of silence on the other end, long enough for Ethan to consider hanging up, to dismiss this whole insane impulse. Then, Ethan Reed. Well now, that's a voice I haven't heard in, 5 years? 6. Her tone wasn't overtly hostile, but there was an undeniable chill, a careful reserve. I wondered if you'd seen her. Olivia mentioned she was working at L'Étoile Filante. Small world, isn't it? Or perhaps a world that has a way of bringing old ghosts back to the 5-star establishments they once frequented. The barb, subtle as it was, landed. I saw her last night, Chloe, Ethan admitted, his voice huskier than he intended. She's pregnant. Another pause. Longer this time. When Chloe spoke again, the frost in her voice had deepened. Yes, Ethan, she is. And before you ask the questions I can already see forming in that astute corporate mind of yours, let me save you some time. Ethan gripped the phone tighter. Please, Chloe, I need to understand. Is she okay? Okay? Chloe scoffed, a dry, humorless sound. Define okay, Ethan. Is she breathing? Yes. Is she putting on a brave face because that's what Olivia Hayes has always done? Absolutely. But is she okay in the way a woman about to become a single mother, working double shifts in a restaurant because her dream business hit the skids, should be? No, not by a long shot. Her loyalty to Olivia was a palpable force, even through the phone line. He respected it, even as it made his own failings feel more acute. Her business, Olivia Designs, I thought it was doing well. It was, Chloe conceded. Initially, she poured her heart and soul into it, Ethan. You know Olivia. When she believes in something, she gives it everything. And Olivia Designs was her fresh start, her way of proving to herself and maybe to the world that she didn't need, that she could stand on her own. Things were looking up. She was landing some decent projects, getting noticed, Then, about a year ago, a few key contracts fell through, almost simultaneously. Bad luck, maybe, or maybe something else. The market got tight, clients got skittish, it was a perfect storm. Chloe's voice was laced with a weary frustration. And the pregnancy? Ethan asked, bracing himself. Unexpected, Chloe said flatly. Entirely. And the father? Let's just say he made his exit stage left the moment she told him. Vanished. Classic coward. Left Olivia to pick up the pieces as usual. The unspoken accusation, just like you did, hung heavy in the air. So yes, she took the job at L'Etoile Filante, swallowed that fierce pride of hers because she had to. For the baby. She wouldn't ask anyone for help, Ethan, especially not you. You know her pride. It's a fortress. He did know. It was one of the things he'd once loved most about her. Now it felt like another layer of his own culpability. She's a fighter, Ethan, Chloe continued, her voice softening slightly, a grudging respect creeping in. Always has been. She'll move heaven and earth for that child. But this is a lot. Even for her. The exhaustion, I see it in her eyes every time we talk. A fresh wave of guilt, cold and sharp, washed over Ethan. He thought of Olivia's shadowed eyes, the subtle wariness she couldn't quite conceal beneath her professional demeanor. The locket, he found himself saying, the image of the silver pendant vivid in his mind. She was wearing a silver locket. Chloe was silent for a moment. Ah, yes, the locket, your grandmother's, wasn't it? Her voice was knowing. She never takes it off. Never. Even after everything. She once told me it was her only link to a promise of happiness. Silly maybe, but it means the world to her. A reminder, I suppose, that things weren't always like this. A promise of happiness. His promise. Broken. The words were a fresh indictment. What had he done? How had he allowed the pursuit of apex ventures, the relentless climb to the top, to blind him so thoroughly to the precious, irreplaceable thing he'd had with Olivia? The moral dilemma he'd successfully ignored for years now stared him squarely in the face, its features uncannily like Olivia's. Thank you, Chloe, he said, his voice hoarse, for telling me. Don't thank me, Ethan, she replied, the chill returning. If you really want to do something, don't make her life harder than it already is. She's fragile right now, whether she shows it or not. The line went dead. Chloe's words, Olivia's image, the ghost of the locket, they all coalesced into a suffocating weight on Ethan's chest. His rekindled feelings for Olivia, or at least the profound sense of responsibility and regret, were undeniable, yet terrifying in their implications. Meanwhile, the carefully constructed facade of his relationship with Sophia Vance began to show serious cracks. She was no fool. The night at L'Etoile Filante had been a catalyst, a disruption in the smooth, predictable rhythm of their high society courtship. A few days later, as they sat in the cold, minimalist living room of his penthouse, a space Sophia had been subtly trying to warm up with expensive, impersonal art pieces, she confronted him. Her approach was direct, her usual playful demeanor gone, replaced by a colder, more calculating edge. All right, Ethan, enough is enough, she began, setting her wineglass down with a decisive click. This is about that waitress, isn't it? The one from L'Etoile Filante. Olivia, I believe you called her in your sleep the other night. Ethan flinched internally. He hadn't realized. Sophia, it's not what you think. Oh, isn't it? Her eyes, usually a warm, inviting brown, were like chips of ice. You've been a wreck since that night. Distracted, moody, staring off into space like a lovesick teenager. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending it's just work stress. There was a sharpness to her tone now, a precision that made him uneasy. It wasn't just jealousy he sensed, it was something else, something more akin to an assessment of a potential threat to a carefully laid plan. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. There was no point in denying it completely. She's someone I used to know, Sophia. A long time ago. Seeing her like that, it was a shock. A shock. Sophia repeated the word, drawing it out, her lips curving into a mirthless smile. Is that what we're calling it? It looked more like a biblical revelation from where I was sitting. She rose, pacing the room with the predatory grace of a panther. So what now, Ethan? Are you planning to play knight in shining armor to this relic from your past? Her disdain for Olivia was clear, and it pricked at Ethan's already raw conscience. I don't know what I'm planning, he said, his voice tight. Just as the tension in the room reached an almost unbearable pitch, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. An email. Subject line, unfinished business. He opened it, his blood running cold. The message was short, anonymous, and deeply unsettling. Some promises can't be outrun, read. Debts always come due. He stared at it, a prickle of genuine fear mixing with the guilt and confusion already churning within him. Spam? Or something more sinister? Another email arrived almost immediately. The past always collects, with interest. He quickly closed his laptop, but Sophia had seen his reaction. What is it now, Ethan? More ghosts? Her voice was laced with a strange mixture of sarcasm and intense curiosity. He dismissed the emails as a prank, some sort of phishing attempt, but they lingered in the back of his mind, adding another layer of unease to his already fractured state. The cryptic messages felt like a tightening net. Over the next few weeks, Ethan tried to navigate the minefield of his emotions. He found himself unable to simply ignore Olivia's plight. Using discreet channels, he anonymously directed a few lucrative, high-profile interior design projects towards Olivia Designs. He told himself it was the least he could do, a small, impersonal gesture to alleviate some of his crushing guilt. He heard through a casual business acquaintance who knew Chloe that Olivia was thrilled, albeit puzzled by the sudden influx of prestigious clients. She was working tirelessly, her creative spark reigniting. Hearing this brought Ethan a small measure of relief, a fleeting sense that perhaps he wasn't entirely a lost cause. But it wasn't enough. The image of her, pregnant and alone, still haunted him. The silver locket, her supposed link to a promise of happiness, felt like a personal condemnation. He was torn. His feelings for Olivia were a confusing tangle of past affection, present guilt, and an undeniable, rekindled something. And then there was Sophia. Their relationship, once a comfortable if somewhat superficial alliance, was now strained to the breaking point. She watched him constantly, her eyes missing nothing, her earlier warmth replaced by an unnerving, calculating coolness. She seemed less like a jilted lover and more like an investor watching a valuable asset suddenly depreciate. The inevitable confrontation came one rain-lashed evening. Sophia stood before him, her arms crossed, her expression unyielding. "I've given you space, Ethan. I've been patient. But my patience has its limits." Her voice was low, controlled. "You need to make a choice. Her or me. Because I won't be a placeholder. I won't be the consolation prize while you pine over some waitress who clearly couldn't handle the life you offered her once before." The cruelty of her words, the dismissive wave of her hand as she spoke of Olivia, finally snapped something in Ethan. "That's enough, Sophia." "Is it?" she challenged, stepping closer. "You need to be very careful, Ethan. You're distracted, unfocused, and a distracted CEO of a company like Apex Ventures." She let the sentence hang, a veiled threat shimmering in the air between them. Well, let's just say vulnerabilities have a way of being exploited, especially when there are so many consequences from the past that might resurface. Was that another reference to the cryptic emails? Or just a general warning about the cutthroat world they inhabited? "Are you threatening me, Sophia?" She smiled, a slow, cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm merely stating a fact, darling. This obsession with your past, it's a liability. Choose before the choice is made for you." With that, she turned and walked out, the click of her heels on the marble floor a sharp counterpoint to the drumming rain outside. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing the finality of her words, a sound that resonated with the slamming of another door years ago when Olivia had walked out of his life. Alone, with the city's indifferent lights, painting his lavish prison in hues of gray and blue, Ethan Reed knew a decision point had arrived. The anonymous threats pinging on his phone, Olivia's silent struggle, the silver locket symbolizing a broken promise of happiness, and Sophia's chilling ultimatum, it was all converging. He stared out at the glittering, rain-slicked skyline, a view that had once represented the pinnacle of his achievements, the triumph of Apex Ventures. Tonight, it just looked like a monument to his own profound emptiness. He had to see Olivia, really talk to her, before the weight of what was and what might have been crushed him completely. The silence in the penthouse was a heavy shroud after Sophia's departure. Each tick of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to mark a moment stolen from Olivia, from a life he might have had, a life sacrificed on the altar of Apex Ventures. The cryptic emails, Those unsettling whispers from the digital ether felt less like spam now and more like a countdown, a clock ticking toward some unknown, ominous event. His path, however fraught with peril and the potential for more pain, was clear. It wasn't easy, not by a long shot, but it was necessary. He had to face Olivia Hayes directly. No more intermediaries, no more anonymous gestures. He had to look her in the eye and confront the wreckage of their shared past. Some truths hide in plain sight, gleaming under the chandeliers of expensive restaurants, noticed only by those who know where to look. Others, perhaps the more potent ones, lurk in the shadows of a service alley, illuminated by the harsh, unforgiving glow of a bare bulb. For Ethan Reed, confronting Olivia was about to illuminate more than just the gritty details of her current struggles. It was about to expose the barrenness of his own soul, the hollowness that all his millions could not fill. He returned to L'Étoile Filante the following evening, not as a conquering hero of industry, but as a supplicant, a man stripped of his usual armor of confidence. He didn't enter the main dining room. Instead, he navigated the labyrinthine service corridors, his bespoke suit feeling out of place amidst the clatter of pans and the hurried footsteps of kitchen staff. He found a discreet corner near the back entrance, the air thick with the smell of discarded food and stale cigarettes, and waited. His nerves were frayed, each minute stretching into an eternity. What if she refused to see him? What if his presence only caused her more pain, more public humiliation? The thought was a cold stone in his gut. Then he saw her. Olivia emerged into the dimly lit alley for what was presumably a break, leaning against the grimy brick wall, her shoulders slumped. The harsh fluorescent light from a nearby security lamp cast deep shadows under her eyes, highlighting her exhaustion in a way the restaurant's soft, flattering lighting had not. She looked smaller, more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. Yet there was still that undeniable core of strength, of rythme, that resilient spirit he'd once cherished and then so carelessly crushed. He approached slowly, his footsteps echoing unnervingly in the narrow space. She looked up, her eyes widening slightly in surprise, then immediately narrowing, a defensive mask snapping into place. The wariness in her expression was quickly overlaid with a guarded, wary hostility. "Ethan." Her voice was flat, devoid of inflection but heavy with unspoken history. "What do you want? Haven't you done enough for one lifetime?" He flinched at the thinly veiled accusation. He deserved it. He deserved so much more. "Olivia, please," he began, his voice raspy. "Can we just talk for a few minutes?" She pushed herself off the wall, her arms crossing protectively over her chest, over the slight swell of her pregnancy. "Talk about what, Ethan? The good old days? Or perhaps you're here to offer a critique of my waitressing skills." The bitterness in her tone was a physical blow. "No, of course not," he said quickly. I'm worried about you. I know about the business, Olivia. About everything. Chloe told me." Olivia stiffened, her eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and betrayal. "Chloe had no right. This is my life, Ethan, not some corporate sob story for you to analyze and fix with your endless resources." She took a shaky breath. "I don't need your pity, and I most certainly don't need your charity." "It's not pity, Olivia, I swear," he insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. He took a step closer, his hands outstretched in a placating gesture he immediately regretted as she recoiled. "It's concern. Genuine concern. I made mistakes, Olivia. Huge, unforgivable mistakes. I let Apex Ventures become everything. I let my ambition devour what was most precious. I lost you. And seeing you the other night, seeing you now, I can't just walk away and pretend it didn't happen. I can't live with that." A tense, emotional silence hung between them, broken only by the distant hum of city traffic and the mournful cry of a far-off siren. Olivia's gaze was fixed on him, her expression a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. He could see the pain there, the old wounds he had inflicted, but also a flicker of something else. Curiosity? Or was it just the weary resignation of a fighter who was tired of fighting? When she finally spoke, her voice was low, laced with a profound sadness that tore at him. "Do you have any idea what it's been like, Ethan?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "The loneliness, the fear? Starting over from scratch, pouring every last ounce of myself into Olivia Designs, only to watch it crumble? And then finding out about the baby." Her hand instinctively went to her stomach. Facing this all alone, wondering how I'm going to manage, how I'm going to provide. It's a constant battle, Ethan. Every single day. She touched the silver locket at her throat, her fingers tracing its intricate carvings. This, she said, her voice barely a whisper, this was a promise of a different life. A life with laughter, with partnership, with shared dreams. A life you chose to forget, Ethan. A life you traded for boardrooms and balance sheets. The sting of her words was acute, a searing indictment of his choices. He felt the full weight of his past neglect, the crushing burden of his selfishness. I know, he choked out, the apology feeling woefully inadequate. I know I messed up. I was a fool, Olivia. Blinded by things that don't matter. Not really. Not compared to what I threw away. He looked directly into her eyes, trying to convey the depth of his remorse, the raw, heartfelt apology that had been dammed up inside him for years. I am so sorry. For everything, for the pain I caused you, for the dreams I shattered, for not being the man you deserved. As they stood there, locked in their emotional crucible, a flicker of movement in the deeper shadows at the end of the alley caught Ethan's peripheral vision. A dark shape, a shadowy figure observing them. Before he could get a clear look, it was gone, melting back into the urban gloom. A chill traced its way down his spine. Was it just a vagrant, or was it something more? The cryptic emails flashed through his mind. The feeling of being watched, of unseen forces at play, intensified. Was this paranoia, or was Sophia's reach, her capacity for what? Greater than he imagined? Or was it something or someone else entirely? He pushed the unsettling thought aside, focusing back on Olivia. He had to make her understand. I want to help, Olivia, he said, his voice earnest, pleading. Not as charity, please, don't see it that way. But I have connections, resources. I can help Olivia Designs get back on its feet, truly flourish. I can make sure you and the baby, that you're secure, that you don't have to struggle like this. No strings attached, I swear. Just let me do this one thing right. Let me try to atone for some of the damage I've done. Olivia searched his face, her eyes narrowed, her expression still wary. She was torn. He could see the internal battle raging within her. The offer of help, genuine help, was tempting, a lifeline in the storm of her current existence. But the source? Could she trust him? Could she risk opening herself up to that kind of pain again, the pain of his inevitable departure, his return to the glittering, soulless world he inhabited? Why, Ethan? She finally asked, her voice quiet, almost fragile. Why now? After all these years of silence, of nothing. He met her gaze, his own raw, with a sincerity he hoped she could see, could feel. Because seeing you again, Olivia, it was like a lightning bolt. It reminded me of everything I threw away, everything I lost. It reminded me of the man I used to be, or at least the man I wanted to be, with you. And maybe, he paused, the words catching in his throat, maybe it's not too late to try and be a better man. Maybe it's not too late for something. A long silence stretched between them. Olivia's gaze never left his, searching, probing. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. A single, hesitant nod. Okay, Ethan, she said, her voice barely audible. For the baby. Only for the baby. For Leo. Leo. The baby had a name. Her son. A wave of complex emotion washed over Ethan. Relief, a fragile sense of hope, and a profound aching sense of responsibility. Leo, he repeated softly. It's a strong name. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched Olivia's lips. He's a fighter, like his mother. Ethan felt a knot in his chest loosen, a fragile sense of connection, of a shared purpose beginning to form. He wanted to reach out, to take her hand, but he held back, sensing the delicate balance of this newfound tentative truce. Thank you, Olivia, he said simply. He was about to leave, to give her space, to let this fragile understanding settle, when she stopped him, her voice hesitant. Ethan, wait. He turned back, his heart lurching. There's something else, she said, her fingers once again straying to the silver locket. About this locket, you said it was your grandmother's. Yes, he confirmed, puzzled. It was. I found something. After we separated, she continued, her eyes downcast, as if reluctant to meet his. I was cleaning it one day, and I noticed there's an inscription. Inside the clasp. It's tiny, almost invisible now, worn down with age. I had to use a magnifying glass to read it. She looked up, her gaze piercing. It says, Amor Fati. Amor Fati? Ethan repeated, the Latin phrase unfamiliar. Yes, Olivia confirmed. I looked it up. It means love of one's fate, or to love one's fate, to accept, even embrace, everything that happens in life, the good and the bad, as necessary. She paused, her eyes searching his. I always wondered if you knew it was there, if it was something your grandmother or your family believed in. The revelation hung in the air between them, adding another layer of mystery, another thread of connection to their tangled past. Amor fati. Love of one's fate. What did it mean in the context of their story, of their shattered dreams and the unexpected, fragile hope that now flickered between them? Ethan stared at her, the words echoing in his mind, a Latin phrase tangled with the image of Olivia's brave, tired face and the unseen eyes he was increasingly certain had watched them from the deeper shadows of the alley. Helping her, helping Leo, was no longer just an option, a way to assuage his guilt. It was becoming a path he felt compelled to walk, a destiny perhaps, that he had to embrace, wherever it might lead. But who was watching them, and why? The shadowy figure was gone, but the chilling sense of being observed, of being a pawn in some larger, unseen game, lingered, a cold counterpoint to the fragile warmth beginning to thaw the ice around his heart. Leaving the alley, Ethan felt as though he'd shed an old skin, the grimy encounter a strange sort of baptism. The conversation with Olivia, the revelation of Amor fati etched into the antique silver locket, had cracked open something within him, a part of his soul he'd kept locked away for years, barricaded behind the glittering facade of Apex Ventures. But the chilling sensation of being observed in that desolate alley, the fleeting glimpse of a shadowy figure, was a stark reminder that their rekindled fragile connection might be unfolding on a very dangerous stage, with unseen players watching from the wings. The call, when it came weeks later, was like a lightning strike in the dead of night, not heralding a business crisis from some far-flung corner of his empire, but delivering news that resonated with a far more primal urgency, a life hanging in the balance. The past wasn't just knocking, it was about to be born. In the intervening weeks, a delicate, unspoken truce had settled between Ethan and Olivia. He discreetly channeled opportunities towards Olivia Designs, leveraging his extensive network with a subtlety born of newfound humility. He saw the spark return to her work, the passion that had once so captivated him now rekindled, her designs imbued with a fresh, resilient creativity. Chloe Jenkins served as a cautious, sometimes reluctant intermediary, reporting that Olivia's business was indeed flourishing, a bloom of unexpected success in the barren landscape of her recent struggles. Their own communication was sparse, respectful, freighted with the unspoken weight of their history and the uncertain promise of a future. Ethan found himself checking his phone more often, a strange anticipation warring with a deep-seated fear of overstepping, of shattering the fragile peace. But the peace was illusory. The cryptic messages to Ethan continued, arriving with an unsettling regularity, each one a poisoned dart aimed at his conscience. They became more specific, more unnerving, hinting at a dark chapter in Apex Ventures' ascent, a particularly ruthless deal from years past, one that had been ethically questionable, to put it mildly. And then, a new, chilling detail emerged in one of the anonymous emails, a name, vaguely familiar, linked to that old, buried scandal, a name that, with a jolt of dawning horror, he began to connect to Sophia Vance's family. A knot of ice formed in Ethan's stomach. This couldn't be a coincidence. The shadowy figure in the alley, Sophia's increasingly calculating demeanor, her veiled threats about Apex Ventures' vulnerabilities, the cryptic messages, it was all beginning to coalesce into a terrifying, cohesive picture. Driven by a gnawing unease, Ethan initiated a discreet, high-level investigation, using resources far removed from his usual corporate channels. What he uncovered sent a shockwave through his already fractured world. Sophia Vance wasn't just a beautiful, ambitious socialite who had conveniently appeared in his life. She was the daughter of Alistair Vance, a former business rival, a man whose company Ethan had systematically and ruthlessly dismantled years ago in a takeover that had been brutal even by the standards of their cutthroat world. Alistair Vance had been financially ruined, his reputation shattered. He had died a broken man a year later, and Sophia, it seemed, was playing a very long, very cold game of revenge, aiming to dismantle Apex Ventures and him from within. The betrayal was staggering, a calculated strike to the heart of his empire and his ego. He confronted her that same night. The evidence from his investigation, a damning dossier, spread across the polished mahogany of his penthouse coffee table. The usual pretense of their relationship, the polite fictions they had maintained, evaporated in an instant. "Who are you, Sophia?" he asked, his voice deceptively calm, though a storm raged within him. She didn't feign surprise. Instead, a slow, chilling smile spread across her perfectly made-up face. "Took you long enough, Ethan. I was beginning to think the great Ethan Reed had lost his edge." "Alistair Vance," he stated, the name a lead weight in the room. "He was your father." "He was," she confirmed, her eyes, usually so warm, now blazing with a cold, unadulterated hatred that stunned him. "And you destroyed him, Ethan. You remember, don't you? Or was he just another casualty in your relentless climb to the top, another insignificant bug crushed under the heel of Apex Ventures?" The raw venom in her voice was chilling. "The emails," he said, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. "The threats, that was you." "Of course it was me," she spat. All pretense of sophistication gone, replaced by a raw, consuming fury. "Did you think those little love notes were from some disgruntled ex-employee? I wanted you destabilized, Ethan. I wanted you looking over your shoulder. I wanted you to feel a fraction of the fear and uncertainty you inflicted on my father, on my family." She paced the room like a caged tigress, her expensive gown a shimmering shroud of her rage. "My plan was simple, really. Get close to you, learn your vulnerabilities, find the cracks in your precious Apex Ventures, and then bring it all crashing down. Poetic justice, don't you think? You were going to destroy my company, my life's work?" The scale of her betrayal, the depth of her vengeful commitment, was almost incomprehensible. "Your life's work?" she laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You destroyed my father's life, Ethan. You took everything from him, his business, his reputation, his will to live. This," she gestured around the opulent penthouse, "this empire you're so proud of, it's built on the wreckage of other people's lives. People like my father." Her voice was trembling with suppressed sobs, her carefully constructed composure finally shattering. "I was going to make you pay. I was going to watch you lose everything, just like he did." As she stood there, radiating a toxic blend of grief and hatred, her threats escalating, Ethan's phone shrilled, a jarring interruption to the venomous atmosphere. He glanced at the caller ID. "Chloe Jenkins." His heart lurched. He answered, his voice tight. "Chloe? What is it?" Chloe's voice was frantic, breathless. "Ethan, it's Olivia. She's gone into labor. It's too early. Weeks too early. She's at City General and she's scared, Ethan. She's asking for you." The world tilted. Sophia, her revenge plot, Apex Ventures, it all receded, shrinking into insignificance. Olivia, in labor, asking for him. "I'm on my way," he said, his voice suddenly clear, decisive. Sophia stared at him, her tirade cut short, her expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. "You're not actually going?" "We're done, Sophia." Ethan cut her off, his voice like ice, his gaze unwavering. "You've lost. Whatever game you were playing, it's over." He didn't wait for a reply. He grabbed his keys, his mind already at City General with Olivia. He left Sophia standing amidst the wreckage of her own meticulously crafted revenge, her face a mask of seething, impotent rage. The drive to the hospital was a blur. He found Olivia in a private room, her face pale, beads of sweat clinging to her forehead, but her eyes, when they met his, were filled with a mixture of raw fear and an incredible steely resolve. "You came," she whispered, a shaky smile touching her lips. "Of course I came," he said, his voice thick with emotion as he rushed to her side, taking her hand. It felt small, fragile in his, yet her grip was surprisingly strong. "I'm here, Olivia. I'm not going anywhere." The hours that followed were an agonizing, emotional crucible. He stayed by her side through every contraction, every wave of pain that racked her small frame. He held her hand, wiped her brow, whispered words of encouragement, his usual eloquence replaced by simple, heartfelt assurances. He saw her strength, a raw, primal courage he had never witnessed before. He saw her vulnerability, the fear that flickered in her eyes, and it tore at him, making him wish he could somehow absorb her pain, shield her from it. It was a profound, unexpected bonding experience, stripping away years of resentment and regret, leaving only the raw, unfiltered connection of two people facing a monumental, life-altering event together. During a brief, exhausted lull between contractions, Olivia's eyes, heavy-lidded but lucid, found his. She murmured, her voice weak. "The locket. Amor fati." I've been thinking. I think it meant we were fated to find our way, no matter what, no matter how lost we got. Maybe even back to this. A single tear traced a path down her temple. His heart ached. Before he could respond, just as the medical team began to prepare for the final stages of delivery, a nurse bustled in. She held a small, sealed envelope. "Mr. Reed? Miss Hayes asked me to give this to you. She said only if something happens to her." Ethan's blood ran cold. He took the envelope, his hand trembling. "Only if something happens to me." He pocketed it, his heart constricting with a sudden, visceral fear. Then, after what felt like an eternity of agonizing effort and raw primal cries, it happened. A new sound filled the room, the strong, lusty wail of a newborn. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, his voice bright. Baby Leo Hayes had arrived, small, perfectly formed, and blessedly healthy despite his early entrance into the world. An overwhelming wave of emotion, relief, joy, a profound, humbling awe washed over Ethan. He looked at Olivia collapse back against the pillows, her face etched with exhaustion but illuminated by an expression of pure, radiant love as the nurse gently placed their son in her arms. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she gazed at the tiny, squirming bundle. "He's perfect," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Oh, Ethan, he's so perfect." Ethan leaned over, his own eyes blurring, his gaze fixed on the tiny, red-faced infant. "He is," he agreed, his throat tight. "He absolutely is." Later, as Olivia rested, her breathing deep and even, Leo sleeping soundly in a bassinet beside her bed, Ethan remembered the letter. With trembling fingers, he retrieved it from his pocket. The paper was soft, slightly crinkled. He opened it. Olivia's familiar handwriting, elegant yet strong, filled the page. "My dearest Ethan," it began. "If you are reading this, it means something has gone terribly wrong, and my greatest fear has been realized. There are so many things I should have said, so many things I wish I'd had the courage to tell you." He read on, his heart aching with every word. She confessed she had never truly stopped loving him, that even through the pain of their divorce and the lonely years that followed, a part of her had always held on to the memory of what they once shared. She detailed her struggles with Olivia Designs, her initial hopes, the crushing disappointments. She wrote of her hopes for Leo, her fierce determination to give him a good life, a life filled with love and security. And then she wrote about the locket. That silly silver locket. It was all I had left of that promise of happiness, Ethan. A symbol that what we had, however broken it became, was real. That the love was real. The final paragraph sent a fresh chill down his spine, despite the warmth of the hospital room. "There's something else, Ethan. Something I've suspected, but could never prove. After our divorce, when I was trying to get Olivia Designs off the ground, I always felt like someone was working against me. Doors that should have opened, didn't. Clients who seemed enthusiastic suddenly pulled back. It was too consistent to be just bad luck. I think someone might have deliberately sabotaged my early attempts, someone who knew my vulnerabilities, someone who wanted to see me fail." Ethan's tears fell freely now as he finished the letter. He looked from the tear-stained page to Olivia, sleeping peacefully, then to their son, their miraculous Leo. A fierce primal protectiveness, a renewed and deepened love, surged through him, so powerful it almost buckled his knees. Olivia's suspicions? Could it be possible? Could Sophia's vindictive revenge plot have extended beyond Apex Ventures, beyond him? Had she, in her cold, calculated hatred, also targeted Olivia years ago, adding another layer of cruelty to her already devastating scheme? The thought was sickening. Olivia's words from the letter, "I never stopped loving you," merged with the tiny, contented sounds of baby Leo breathing in the nearby bassinet. The pieces of a very dark puzzle clicked into place. Sophia's treachery, the true extent of Olivia's suffering, the locket's silent, steadfast witness to it all. This wasn't just a second chance. It was a battlefield. And he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that he had to fight for this new, fragile family, protect them from the shadows that still seemed to linger. Olivia's words from the letter, "I never stopped loving you," merged with the tiny, contented sounds of baby Leo breathing softly in the hospital bassinet. The pieces of a very dark and complicated puzzle clicked sharply into place. Sophia's calculated treachery, the true, harrowing extent of Olivia's suffering, the antique silver locket's silent, steadfast witness to it all. This wasn't just a second chance at love that had been miraculously offered to him. It was a battlefield upon which he now understood he had to stand and fight, not for an empire of steel and glass, but for this new, fragile family that was his to protect, his to cherish. With a newborn's cry echoing the beat of his own reborn heart, Ethan Reed knew one thing, with a clarity that transcended all his previous understanding of success and power. Empires could crumble, fortunes could fade into insignificance, but the foundation of love, once rediscovered, once fought for, was unshakable. It was the only true bedrock in a world of shifting sands. The following weeks unfolded in a whirlwind of sleepless nights, milky breaths, and the quiet, profound intimacy of new parenthood. The sterile environment of the hospital soon gave way to the gentle chaos of Olivia's small, sunlit apartment, which Ethan found himself gravitating towards with an instinct he no longer questioned. He was a constant, supportive presence, a far cry from the driven, often absent husband he had once been. He learned the delicate art of swaddling, the rhythmic patting that soothed Leo's infrequent cries, the quiet patience required for late-night feedings. He offered Olivia unwavering emotional and practical support, fetching groceries, making tea, simply sitting with her in companionable silence as she nursed Leo, a quiet sentinel against the weariness that often threatened to overwhelm her. In those hushed, tender moments, cocooned in the glow of the nursery lamp, they talked. Really talked. Not with the guardedness of recent encounters, nor with the bitterness of past grievances, but with an open, vulnerable honesty that was both terrifying and liberating. They spoke of their past, dissecting their mistakes with a gentle, newfound wisdom. They acknowledged the pain they had inflicted upon each other, the dreams they had allowed to wither. And they spoke of their hopes, fragile yet persistent, for Leo, for themselves, for this unexpected, unwritten chapter. The weight of unspoken truths, carried for so long, began to lift, replaced by the lighter burden of shared understanding and a dawning forgiveness. The shadow of Sophia Vance's actions, however, still loomed. But Ethan, with a quiet resolve that surprised even himself, dealt with it. He didn't seek public vengeance, no dramatic corporate takedown that would echo his past ruthless tactics. Instead, he pursued a path of quiet justice. He gathered the irrefutable evidence of her corporate espionage, her attempts to destabilize Apex Ventures, and, more damningly, the subtle, insidious ways she had likely contributed to the initial downfall of Olivia Designs. He presented it all to the relevant authorities, ensuring that Sophia would face the legal consequences for her actions, not just against his company, but against Olivia. It was a chapter closed not with a bang, but with the firm, steady hand of accountability. There was no triumph in it for Ethan, only a somber sense of responsibility fulfilled. His own empire, Apex Ventures, no longer held the same allure. The thrill of the deal, the pursuit of ever greater profits, felt hollow, meaningless, compared to the profound connection he was forging with Olivia and Leo. At a board meeting that shocked the financial world, Ethan Reed, the titan of industry, announced his decision to step back significantly from the day-to-day operations of the company. He appointed Isabel Moreau, his sharp, fiercely intelligent assistant, a woman who possessed not only a brilliant business mind, but also an unwavering moral compass, as his successor, the new CEO. His colleagues were stunned. The market buzzed with speculation, but Ethan felt only a profound sense of liberation. His focus had shifted, irrevocably. It now rested squarely on Olivia, on Leo, and on a burgeoning desire to use his considerable resources for good. Inspired by Olivia's resilience and her quiet passion for helping others, he began to lay the groundwork for a foundation dedicated to supporting single parents and struggling entrepreneurs, a way to transform his wealth from a symbol of power into an engine of opportunity. The antique silver locket, with its cryptic Amor Fati inscription, became a shared symbol between them, a touchstone for their evolving relationship. Intrigued by its deeper meaning, Ethan undertook his own quiet investigation. He traced its origins through an old family jeweler, a craftsman whose records spanned generations. The discovery was astonishing, adding another layer of profound significance to the small piece of silver Olivia wore so faithfully. The locket hadn't just belonged to his grandmother. It had been commissioned by his great-grandfather for his great-grandmother nearly a century before. The inscription, Amor fati wasn't just a random philosophical phrase. It was a cherished family motto, passed down through generations, a guiding principle about embracing one's destiny, about accepting and loving all of life's experiences, even the most difficult and painful paths, because those were often the very paths that led to true fulfillment, to a deeper understanding of oneself and the world. Learning this, sharing it with Olivia, felt like uncovering a missing piece of his own soul, a legacy of love and resilience that resonated deeply with their own improbable journey. The locket was no longer just a reminder of a broken promise, but a testament to an enduring, fated connection. One cool evening, weeks after they had brought Leo home, they sat together on the comfortable, slightly worn sofa in Olivia's living room. Leo, snug in a soft blue sleeper, lay asleep in a Moses basket between them, his tiny chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. The city lights twinkled through the window, no longer mocking Ethan with their cold brilliance, but offering a soft, distant glow. Olivia turned to him, her eyes, no longer shadowed by exhaustion, but shining with a soft, luminous light, met his. "You've changed, Ethan," she said, her voice quiet, filled with a gentle wonder. "The man I see now, the man who changes diapers at 3 a.m. without complaint, who sings slightly off-key lullabies to his son, who listens with such patience, he's the man I always knew was in there somewhere. The one I fell in love with all those years ago, before Apex, before everything." A lump formed in Ethan's throat. He reached for her hand, his fingers lacing through hers, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. "You showed me the way back, Olivia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You and Leo. You are my amor fati. You helped me embrace a fate I was too blind, too arrogant to see." He paused, then reached into his pocket, his heart thrumming a nervous rhythm against his ribs. He produced a small, unassuming velvet box. It wasn't the ostentatious display of wealth he might have offered in his past life. He opened it. Inside, nestled against the dark velvet, wasn't a lavish multi-carat diamond, but a simple, elegant band of brushed white gold, its design subtly echoing the intricate carvings on the Amor Fati locket. "This isn't about replacing the past, Olivia," he said, his gaze locked on hers, his soul laid bare. "It's about building a new future, together. A future based on honesty, on trust, on this incredible second chance we've been given." He took a deep breath. "Olivia Hayes, will you marry me? Will you build that future with me, with Leo?" Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, spilling over and tracing shining paths down her cheeks. She didn't speak for a long moment, her gaze searching his, seeing the truth, the unwavering commitment reflected there. Then, with a watery, radiant smile that lit up her entire being, she nodded. "Yes, Ethan," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes. Oh, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, a quiet, profound symbol of their renewed commitment, not a grand public gesture, but a deep, intimate understanding forged in the crucible of shared pain and rediscovered love. There were no soaring orchestras, no dramatic pronouncements, just the soft sigh of their mingled breaths, the gentle rhythm of their sleeping child, and the unspoken promise of a lifetime. Months later, their life had found a new, richer rhythm. They lived not in Ethan's sterile penthouse, but in a warm, comfortable home filled with laughter, the scent of baby powder, and the happy chaos of a life being truly lived. Their existence wasn't defined by Ethan's old 9-figure wealth or the dizzying heights of corporate power, but by their shared values, their commitment to each other, and their boundless love for their son. Olivia's design business, Olivia Designs, was thriving, her reputation built on talent, integrity, and a newfound joy in her work. Ethan, having divested himself of the daily burdens of Apex Ventures, poured his energy and considerable acumen into his new foundation, finding a profound sense of purpose in helping others achieve their dreams, just as Olivia had inspired him to rediscover his own. Leo was growing, a happy, gurgling testament to their second chance, his bright, curious eyes reflecting the love that surrounded him. One late afternoon, as the autumn sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in breathtaking hues of apricot and rose, Ethan stood by the large bay window of their living room, Leo cradled securely in his arms. Olivia came to stand beside him, leaning her head against his shoulder, her hand resting on Leo's soft curls. The Amor Fati locket rested against her heart, a familiar, comforting weight. They watched the sunset, a comfortable silence settling between them. A silence filled not with unspoken regrets, but with a deep, abiding peace. The setting sun painted their small world in gold, a world rebuilt not on the ashes of the old, but on the solid ground of forgiveness, growth, and a love that had found its true north in amor fati. Their unwritten chapter promised not perfection, for life was seldom so neat, but something far more precious: authenticity, shared joy, and the courage to face whatever came next, together. And so, under a sky blushing with the promise of countless tomorrows, Ethan, Olivia, and little Leo stood as a testament not just to their own improbable, hard-won journey, but to a universal truth often whispered in the quiet corners of weary hearts but seldom grasped with such life-altering clarity. The capacity for change, for redemption, for love to find its way back even from the deepest desolation is not a fairy tale, but a profound human potential. They say the greatest risks yield the greatest rewards. It's a maxim Ethan Reed had once applied with ruthless precision to the high-stakes world of corporate finance, where fortunes were made and lost on the turn of a market, the whisper of a rumor. But what if the real reward, the kind that settles deep in your soul and warms you from the inside out, isn't found in the cold calculus of a stock portfolio or the glittering towers of an empire like Apex Ventures? What if, instead, it's discovered in the courageous, terrifying, and ultimately transformative embrace of a second chance, a mended heart, and a future rewritten not by ambition or power, but by the quiet, unwavering strength of love? Ethan and Olivia's story, woven from threads of regret, unexpected shocks, bitter betrayals, and the raw, unvarnished challenges of rebuilding a trust that had once been shattered into a million pieces, was far more than a simple romance rekindled. It was, at its core, a profound narrative of personal transformation, a testament to the human spirit's remarkable ability to heal, to grow, and to redefine what it truly means to live a rich and meaningful life. Ethan, once the undisputed titan of industry, a man whose identity had been so inextricably linked to his net worth, his power, his ability to command and control, had embarked on a journey that led him to an entirely different kind of balance sheet. He discovered true wealth, not in the acquisition of assets or the conquest of markets, but in the quiet moments of connection. The warmth of Leo's small hand curled around his finger, the shared laughter that now echoed in their home, the profound vulnerability of opening his heart to Olivia again, and the deep, abiding satisfaction of using his resources not for personal gain, but in service to others. He learned that strength wasn't about invincibility, but about the courage to admit fault, to ask for forgiveness, and to change from the inside out. And Olivia, always a symbol of quiet resilience and unwavering strength, found that her capacity for forgiveness, not a cheap, easy pardon, but a hard-won release of past pain, and her enduring, almost stubborn belief in the possibility of love, could indeed pave the way for a happiness she had long thought lost to her forever. She had faced down her fears, her pride, and the crushing weight of single parenthood, emerging not unscathed but stronger, her spirit tempered by adversity, her heart, once so carefully guarded, now open to the possibility of a future she hadn't dared to dream of. Her journey was a quiet ode to the power of self-reliance, but also to the grace of accepting help, of allowing oneself to be loved truly and unconditionally. Their path had been anything but easy. It was a veritable minefield of past regrets, of moments where the ghosts of their former selves threatened to derail their fragile progress. The unexpected shock of their reunion at L'Étoile Filante, the insidious threat posed by Sophia Vance's meticulously plotted revenge, the unsettling suspense of the cryptic messages that had seemed to emanate from the very shadows of Ethan's past ambition. Each of these elements had converged, stripping away layers of pretense, forcing them to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves and each other. And then there was the miracle of Leo's birth, an event that had acted as both a catalyst and a crucible, forging their bond anew in the shared intensity of fear and overwhelming joy. Through it all, the antique silver locket with its almost invisible inscription, Amor Fati, had served as a silent, potent talisman. It was more than just a piece of inherited jewelry. It became their guiding principle. They came to understand its deeper meaning, not as a passive resignation to fate, but as an active, courageous embrace of all that life presented. The painful and the joyful, the betrayals and the blessings. Recognizing that each experience, each challenge, was a necessary part of their journey towards authentic living, towards becoming the people they were meant to be. It was a reminder that even the most difficult paths, the ones littered with the debris of broken dreams and past mistakes, could lead to the most profound and unexpected fulfillment. The story of Ethan, Olivia, and little Leo, in its essence, serves as an allegory, a beacon of hope for anyone who has ever felt lost in the wilderness of their own choices, who has ever stumbled and fallen, or who has ever yearned with a desperate, aching heart for the chance to make things right, to rewrite a painful chapter. It underscores a fundamental truth, that true success, the kind that nourishes the soul, isn't measured by the ability to avoid falls, to navigate life without error. For who among us can claim such perfection? But rather by how one chooses to rise after a fall, by the willingness to learn from mistakes, to forgive oneself and others, and most importantly, to choose love, again and again, even when it feels like the riskiest venture of all. Imagine them, perhaps a year or so down this new shared road. The scene is not a lavish ballroom or an exclusive restaurant, but the warm, inviting chaos of their own living room. Sunlight streaming through the windows, the air filled with the joyful sounds of a small, intimate gathering. It might be Leo's first birthday. A simple homemade cake sits on the table, slightly lopsided, adorned with a single flickering candle. Genuine friends surround them. Chloe Jenkins, her earlier cynicism, replaced by a warm, teasing affection for Ethan, her fierce loyalty to Olivia, now encompassing their little family. Isabel Moreau, the capable new CEO of Apex Ventures, is there too, not as a corporate subordinate, but as a friend, holding Leo and eliciting a delighted shriek of laughter. Ethan stands slightly apart, a contented smile playing on his lips as he watches Olivia move through the room. Her face lit with an easy, unburdened happiness that makes his heart ache with a sweet, protective love. She catches his eye, and a silent exchange passes between them, a look filled with shared history, deep gratitude, and an unwavering love that needs no words. The Amor Fati locket rests against her heart, its silver warmed by her skin, a quiet, constant reminder of the incredible, improbable journey that had brought them to this moment of simple, profound joy. The final message of their story, then, is one of enduring, resonant hope. It whispers that second chances are not just the stuff of romantic fiction, but real, tangible possibilities available to anyone brave enough to reach for them. It affirms that love, even when battered and broken, can be rebuilt, often emerging stronger, more resilient, and more deeply cherished than before. It teaches us that the most valuable investments we can ever make are not in stocks or bonds, or in the relentless pursuit of material wealth, but in the boundless, often underestimated, capacity of the human heart, for forgiveness, for growth, for connection, for love. The unwritten chapters of Ethan, Olivia, and Leo's lives stretch before them, filled with the promise of ordinary days made extraordinary by their shared commitment. They are not immune to future challenges, for life's path is rarely smooth, but they face whatever comes next together, armed with the hard-won wisdom of their past, the unshakable strength of their renewed bond, and the quiet courage to continue embracing their fate, their amor fati, hand in hand, heart to heart. Their richest winnings, they both knew, would never be found on a balance sheet, but in the immeasurable, ever-expanding currency of a family built on love, forgiveness, and the enduring power of a second chance. So the story has come to an end, dear friends. And if you're still here with us at this very hour, maybe, just maybe, something in this story has quietly touched your heart. Maybe it reminded you of someone you once loved, or of a moment when life gave you a second chance, or took one away. Whatever it is, let's take a moment together to look at this from a gentle, honest perspective, one without blame, without shame, and without the need for a right or wrong. Ethan and Olivia's journey teaches us a powerful truth. Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what truly matters. In the noise of success, we often forget the quiet voices of love, of loyalty, of home. But life, in its own strange and beautiful way, finds a way to bring us back, to strip away what's shallow and reveal what's real. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Olivia didn't let heartbreak harden her. Ethan didn't let guilt destroy him. Instead, they both chose courage. They chose forgiveness. They chose to rebuild. And maybe that's the message here for all of us. That healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means facing the pain, learning from it, and still choosing love. Especially when it's hard. So if you're walking through a difficult chapter in your own life, remember this: storms do pass, and sometimes they clear the sky so we can finally see the stars. If this story moved you, even just a little, I hope you'll share it with someone who might need to hear it too. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us for more stories that speak to the soul. Thank you for being here. Truly.